And
I'd like to welcome everybody tonight on behalf of the UCL Alumni Cyprus Club. This is our second inaugural event, and of course, thanks are due to the British High Commission, who's encouraged our attempts to rejuvenate the Alumni Club in Cyprus. And of course, thanks extended to Ian Whitting, the Deputy High Commissioner, who is here on behalf of the British High Commission to welcome, to welcome the rejuvenation of our attempts and to give some introductory remarks. And of course, I'm very, very happy to welcome a number of UCL alumni, all on the same panel. We are very honored to have with us the esteemed governor of the Central Bank of Cyprus, Constantinos Herodotou, a UCL economist, and of course, Aris Theophilou, who is a UCL engineer, and he's going to give the introductory remarks and welcome everybody on behalf of the UCL Alumni Club in Cyprus. For any further information of how to join the club, or in case you know people who are UCL graduates and would like to join the association, please do not hesitate to contact either myself, Aris Theophilou, and Nicolas Kyriakidis, who is basically the brains behind this whole operation, and he's backstage now handling everything on behalf of the Alumni Association. So I will not waste any more time, and I will ask Ian Whitting to welcome, to give the welcome address on behalf of the British High Commission. Ian, the floor is yours.
thank you very much, Anna. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see the UCL Cyprus Alumni Club reinvigorated and exploring new ways to connect alumni in the current times. A big thank you from me to Nicholas for organising and to Oxygono for the technical support. This is the second UCL alumni event in which I've had the pleasure of participating, following the joint UCL Warwick and Oxford alumni event at the wonderful Pikis Museum in Larnaca late last year. On this evening's topic, I don't want to preempt the experts' discussion, but maybe offer a couple of general thoughts. First, at the global strategic level, I've been struck by remarks from two of my favourite pundits, Jared Diamond and Mariana Mazzucato, who of course has impeccable UCL credentials. I like Jared's contention that since, unlike other global threats, for example, climate change, COVID-19 does not suffer from the problems of definition or measurement or disputes over its consequences, which experience shows only serve to delay a meaningful global response. We should learn this lesson and all join together to solve the problem, rather than doing it one country at a time. And today's Global Vaccine Summit, chaired by Boris Johnson, is a good example of this collaborative approach. Mariana Mazzucato is for open markets, but doing capitalism differently. She argues that innovation cannot thrive without government support of science. She sees COVID-19 as an opportunity to use government support to ensure that scientific and environmental aims succeed. So in practical terms, how might the UK and Cyprus work together post-COVID to help deliver these goals and increase prosperity? Two more thoughts, both very obvious, but equally important. Climate change and transnational education. Both are among the top priorities in our High Commission business plan. First, climate change, and specifically thinking beyond hydrocarbons to the green economy and nature-based solutions to economic growth. We are determined to drive more ambitious action on climate around the world. That's why we're delighted to be hosting the next UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, next year. It is not easy transitioning to net zero emissions by 2050 without affecting our economic development. But we are already engaging with a number of Cypriot institutions in science, research, and business to help create a roadmap, including shipping, and seeing how we can support Cyprus's own initiatives, such as your regional climate change plan and the new plan on biodiversity to be unveiled tomorrow to mark World Environment Day. Second, transnational education, or obviously known as TNE. On the 30th of June, the British Council in Nicosia will host their latest and first virtual seminar on the opportunities of Covid-19 for the TNE sector. What might this look like in the future? UK and Cypriot universities developing their links to attract new students from lucrative Middle Eastern markets, a more targeted approach to matchmaking between specific universities in specific fields, or offering degree programs which could combine spending academic time in both London and the UK, resulting in single or double degrees. I hope all of these. And as you all know personally, with over 40,000 Cypriot alumni of British universities, the tradition of a UK education remains strong in Cyprus. We want that special link through education as a cornerstone of our relations to endure. As COVID-19 reshapes our future, countries will need to work together more than ever to pool resources and develop new mutually beneficial partnerships. In 2020, the 60th year of UK-Cyprus relations and the 80th of the British Council's presence here, this remains a top priority. At the High Commission, we remain keen to reconnect with as many UK alumni as possible, given that education is such an important cornerstone of our bilateral relationship. We're always keen to hear from you about how we can support you to deliver interesting future alumni activities, including involving guest speakers from the UK. So let me close by thanking the organisers of tonight's event again, and all of you for your own personal role in the close web of personal and educational connections that enrich our two countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian, for the words of encouragement, and I'm very happy you've already touched upon two very important issues that we're going to be discussing later on, and that of course is education and sustainability, moving towards a greener economy, a sustainable future in alternative economic ways. So moving now on to the governor of the central bank, Mr. Constantinos Herodotou. He's been the voice of reason in very turbulent times recently, and we are very honored to have him with us today, and I'm sure everybody is very keen to listen to what he has to say in this post-COVID, very, very uncertain world. Constantinos, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I would also like to thank the UCL Cyprus Alumni Club for organizing this event and also giving me the opportunity to exchange a few thoughts on the current situation. As we all know, this is a severe, unprecedented exogenous crisis. But what does that mean in terms of the economy? Obviously, the sudden stop in economic activity because of the lockdown is nothing that can be compared to any precedent recession or banking crisis. Therefore, it's not easy to find out what needs to be done by looking at lessons learned from previous similar crises. The drop was very sudden and very severe, but equally, this will not lead into an immediate comeback of economic activity. As the lockdown measures get relaxed in phases, economic activity will come back in phases, but all current analysis and projections indicate that no matter what happens with the lockdown measures, and here I'm not even assuming a second wave of COVID reappearing, but even with full relaxation of measures until a vaccine is invented and distributed, there will be some type of social distancing in all the affected countries. So that in itself means that there will be a certain type of uncertainty continuing. And what we are witnessing currently in all economies is that even though economic activity obviously is coming back, there is uncertainty as to whether we will have a second wave, how long this entire impact will last, what the total impact on GDP will be, what the total impact will also be on unemployment. All these uncertainties lead to two conclusions, and we're witnessing actually this being realized on the ground, which is that if we look at households, consumption is not coming back to normal levels, even though economic activity is resuming. This uncertainty of unemployment and with the economy, it makes the saving rate of households being higher than normal and continuing to be so, which means in itself that consumption will not come back to normal levels immediately, and it will take a long time for consumption to really come back to the pre-COVID-19 levels. The same can be said about investments from companies. All of these economic uncertainties and duration and depth of the crisis is holding back firms and organizations from implementing fully their investment programs. So as we see that these consumption and investments are being held back, we will see investments and consumption, but not at the level of the pre-COVID-19 crisis. The resumption of making up the loss of GDP will take longer. So all this talk about, is it going to be a V-shaped or a U-shaped or longer? It's going to be V-shaped only in the sense of comparing current economic activity to almost zero economic activity because of the lockdown, but reaching output levels of pre-COVID-19. Currently, we're looking at 2022. I'm talking globally here and not specifically for Cyprus. So in trying to mitigate all these risks into the Eurozone economy, let me start by first saying what we decided at the European Central Bank and at the Governing Council, and then the measures we took at the local level through the Central Bank of Cyprus. Firstly, and I will only focus on the main measures. So at the ECB level, one major new instrument, new measure that we implemented was the targeted long-term refinancing operations with the conditions surrounding the TLTROs. We implemented TLTRO 3, and through that, we made it much easier for the banks to deal with the crisis. And as we all know, the banks are an economic motor of the economy and of the households. The second thing we did was to initiate the Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program. So as early as mid-March, we approved at the Governing Council the PEP, as we call it from the acronym, of buying a total of 750 billion euros of bonds through the markets. This was a very crucial measure that we took because sovereign spreads were increasing. The markets were worried about how different countries that had already relatively high levels of debt would be able to deal with the crisis. When the ECB announced this measure, the spreads came closer to normal, And this enabled the various countries of the Eurozone to issue debt in the markets at the end of March and in April. And as it happens today, we also had another Monetary Policy Governing Council meeting yesterday and today. And today we announced an extension of that program. We will be buying an additional 600 billion euros of such bonds, bringing the total 1,350 million euro, and extending the duration of the program to the middle of 2021. This should give further comfort to the markets that the ECB is here to support and sustain the bond markets, which enables, in return, the Eurozone state members to go out in the market to the extent their finances allow this, to raise capital to compact through fiscal measures the consequences to the economy. In looking at what we did through the Central Bank of Cyprus, let me focus on three main measures only, out of a number of measures we took and announced in March and April. One was in coordination and in parallel with the Single Supervisory Mechanism of Frankfurt. We released a total of almost 1.5 billion euros of capital, a temporary release of capital for the banks. This is to allow the banks to give new lending to the economy, but also to absorb any losses that may come from restructurings and non-performing loans that will arise from this crisis. We announced and initiated a moratorium of loan repayments for 9 months. This has been in effect from the 30th of March and is one of the longest and widest such moratoria in the Eurozone. And we also issued guidance to the banks that any loan restructurings for which they can use the capital we released should be done quickly, with full explanation to the loan holders so that all charges are understood by the loan holder. They should actually be very reasonable with the charges, and they should not benefit from the restructurings in order to profit from them. In other words, the restructurings should be neutral for both the loan holder and the banks as regards profit making. How does all this fit together? I mentioned before the uncertainty as regards the duration of the crisis and the depth of the crisis. So these measures, firstly, starting with a moratorium, it gives protection to both the economy, the households, and the firms for 9 months. Whether they can make the payments of their loans, of their existing loans or not, they will not be classified as non-performing loans, at least until the end of 2020. And as the lockdown measures are being relaxed, and this is what we're witnessing, and hence the wisdom, if I may call it that, for the 9 months of moratorium, cash flow is beginning to come back into the households and the firms, while the moratorium is still there, giving the protection. And this is essential because this moratorium protection is there to give everybody time, the banks and the households and the businesses, to recapture the cash flow in order to be able to service again their loans. And in order to service again their loans, they need to restructure them as they come out of the moratorium. Hence, we released the capital and we instructed the banks not to profit from these restructurings. So just to summarize, we gave the moratorium protection for 9 months so that within, hopefully, that period of time, cash flow starts coming in through the economy starting up again. And we release the capital to the banks to enable them to do the restructurings without caring about the losses they may incur. And hence, we instructed them not to profit in any way from those restructurings. So in a very simplistic manner of explaining the various measures, this is the main philosophy of what we designed and implemented and announced from the Central Bank of Cyprus in end of March and early April. I cannot finish without, even though I was supposed to just talk about the COVID-19 and the economy, Ian did refer to the environment, and he's absolutely right to have done so. Because, yes, of course, COVID is the imminent threat, but the impact of the environment on finance and insurance, and of course, in our daily lives, but looking at it purely from finance and insurance is going to be much bigger, much wider, and much longer. And we are late in acting, and we need to catch up. And here I'm referring also at the global level, but also at the local level of Cyprus. It's a concern and a topic very close to my heart. There were certain measures that I initiated as soon as I took over. We are in a position to announce certain things as regards the environment and these measures, but we are prioritizing now dealing with the COVID-19 consequences. But I just wanted to mention that I fully agree with what Ian said about the importance and severity of the bigger monster, if I may call it that. And we will be tackling that and initiating things as regards that from the Central Bank of Cyprus. I would like to thank the organizers again for giving me this opportunity to share these thoughts with you. And I look forward to hearing the remainder of the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Some very important points, of course, were made. In a time when markets usually beat governments to the ground, the word quickly accompanied the action of the ECB. And it was a very important factor in this, in dealing with the post-COVID, with the COVID consequences and now post-COVID consequences, that at least the ECB is worth an accolade for its very swift action and how central banks across the European Union acted very quickly in par with what was happening at central level. And then, of course, the governor mentioned an economist's nightmare, uncertainty. How do you deal with that? And this is what the speakers will try to address later on. Is there something that we can immediately do in the short term and then the medium term to deal with the consequences of COVID-19? And then, of course, the second trigger word came up, the long term, where we may be dead in the long term, but the next generation won't be. And this is exactly why the environment and dealing with climate change is so important. And it is commendable that the central bank is worried about such things, something which did not happen in the past when central bankers were mainly worried about finances and monetary policy, but now everything seems to be interconnected in a very interconnected world. Thank you, Governor, for taking the time in this very, very, very busy period for you to address this summit. And now I will give the floor to my friend and fellow student and fellow UCL alumnus, Aris Theophilou, to address the floor on behalf of the UCL Alumni Club. Aris.
Thank you, Anna. I would like to welcome you to tonight's online event by the UCL Alumni Club of Cyprus and express particular thanks to our honored guests. The UCL Alumni Club of Cyprus currently exists as an informal group of friends, but we are in direct communication with the UCL Alumni Office in order to have it accredited. This is, in fact, our second inaugural event. The first event took place last December, and it was co-organized with the Oxford and the Alumni University, the Oxford and the Warwick University Alumni Clubs of Cyprus, to which the Deputy High Commissioner attended. We endeavor that through this club, we'll be able to organize social events, networking events, but also interesting discussions such as today's discussion. You can contact us through our Facebook website And we do have an email address that I would like to share with you. This is contact@uclcyprus.org, and I will try to share my screen now so that you can see this in writing. Maybe it's too complicated. So the email address is contact@uclcyprus.org. So please help us to spread the word and attract more members to our club. A couple of decades after my graduation, I've been recently reflecting what did I acquire through my studies in London. I believe that my experience at UCL, it was a growth experience at that age, but I was also exposed to other cultures. I made many international friends, but I was also exposed to the British culture and also the English punctuality, which it helped me develop a different mindset, which was an extremely useful tool for my professional life. I would like to conclude with a couple of comments regarding the current pandemic situation. As a character, I'm always, most of the times, optimistic. And most of the times, this is towards my benefit. Most of the times. I believe that every crisis presents many opportunities. So let's all take this, let's all try to make the best we can out of this crisis, to reflect how we've been doing things, to rethink, and to revise our lifestyle. On the personal side, after this quarantine, I realized that I can stop using my cars for one day a week, 1 day a month. So I recently signed a petition to prohibit the movement of the circulation of the cars within the city for one day a month. On the business side, I believe that there are many opportunities, even during a crisis, for companies to revise their procedures, to train their personnel, and to do some internal transformation. That will be a long-term investment that they will profit on the long term. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll be able to host a real event in which we'll be able to mingle over a glass of wine and to shake our hands without gloves, and we'll keep you posted for our next live event. So thank you very much for attending our event.
Thank you, Aris. Now everybody will be expecting a handshake event next when we will be able to meet each other physically and not just virtually. So the first part of this session is now over and done with. I would like to thank again Ian Whiting on behalf of the British High Commission, the Governor for taking the time to be with us. Both of you gentlemen have been very supportive in this effort. So again, thank you very much. And of course, Aris, thank you for giving the welcome address on behalf of the club, which we hope will take a very formal, will become more formal in the next months when more people join the ranks. So we're ready to go into the discussion on the consequences of COVID-19 on Cyprus economy with two other fellow UCL economist Irene Pikis and Constantinos Papanastasiou. So I'm sure you heard what was said before, and the governor focused on how quickly the ECB acted and how important it is for the banks to act quickly across the European Union to keep money flowing into the economy, and of course how do you best deal with uncertainty? You deal with it by creating positive expectations as much as possible to make the economy going again. So we're now going on to what you guys have to say on this whole topic, and just making very brief introductions because you're both very well known in Cyprus, and I think the introductions are not really needed, but I will make them nevertheless. We're happy to welcome Irene Pikis. Irene is an environmental and resource UCL economist, and she's currently the acting director of the Strategy, Coordination and Communication Director of the Ministry of Finance and a board member of IDEC, the Research and Innovation Foundation in Cyprus. Constantinos at UCL read economics and statistics. He's, among other things, a member of the board of the natural gas public company DEFA and a member of the board of the Cyprus Investment Funds Association CIFA. But I'd like to clarify that even though both speakers bring to the table their professional expertise and the years of working in the fields of these professional fields, they are speaking in their professional and in their personal capacity, and they are not in any way representing the government bodies with which they are affiliated. They are just bringing their personal views to the table, to this discussion. So I think we're ready to shoot off straight away. And the format of the discussion will be thus: 3 questions, same questions, will be posed to the speakers, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to respond to these questions. This will allow some time at the very end for your comments and suggestions as the audience that you can communicate to us through the chat. So I'm starting off with the very first question. At this time of global interdependency, Cyprus cannot really escape unscathed from the shock that the global economy is suffering from. What suggestion would you offer as to the sectors that the Cyprus economy could depend on as take-off sectors for future growth in short and medium term? Irene, shall we start with you?
Yes, thank you, Anna. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm very proud to be a UCL alumnus, and I hope that we'll be able to kick off the club. First of all, I mean, following on to what the governor said, I don't want to go into a lot of details about the crisis we're into now and the recession we're into now. I just wanted to say that indeed we expect the economy to contract in 2020. The baseline scenario talks about around 7%. But we do estimate that in 2021, the economy will grow again and with quite a high rate of around 6%. And I mean, one of the upside risks of this scenario is that we have actually been able as a country to react quite quickly to the pandemic. Which meant probably a few very strong measures, restriction measures at the beginning. But now, 3 months into the pandemic crisis, we see the economy opening quite smoothly. We see the sectors reacting quite well to the reopening of the economy. So we're quite positive that things will go quite well. The only, for me, real risk is a second wave in autumn or a bit later. So going more to your question of what we should do and which sectors we should really aim at. I mean, if you ask me, the question is not so much sectors, it's more structural reforms. I think what our economy needs is we need to build resilience in the economy and promote structural reforms, which is something that has been a main aim and objective of the government for a number of years. One of the main takeouts from this pandemic, I think, has been the effects on the tourism sector. And these show us that it's very important to broaden our productive productive basis. So if I had to choose some sectors on where I think we have seen, we have experiencing growth here in Cyprus, and they also have further potential. And I'll just throw out some names here, and then we can go in the discussion if you want further during the questions time. The one would be regional headquartering, based on the excellent professional services and skilled labor force. I mean, you mentioned that Constantinos is in CIFA. The funds industry has been doing great for the last few years. The other sector very close to my heart is research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. We've seen a great change in the last 1 year and a half in the governance of this sector, and we've seen innovation really kicking up. And again, I can share later if you want some more examples on what we can do further innovation. Tertiary education, especially private tertiary education, and also public universities, but we've seen that they contribute 5% to the GDP. It's a very growing number, and it's a sector that hires a lot of very high-skilled labor. So it's a sector we need to keep looking, and we are looking as a government to this sector, but we need to assist it even more, I think, to grow even further. Renewable energy, very topical now, even with the pandemic crisis and the green growth subject. And also our elderly population and maybe some new opportunities, services to be created because our population is growing older. So this is also, it's an emerging sector where we will see more opportunities. If I could talk just half a minute more for the structural reforms, I would mention most of all digital transformation, especially in the public sector. I think it's very important. We've seen some steps taking place, but should be our focus in the next couple of years, so that business deal much more easier with the government. And also dealing with corruption. I think it's another very important structural reform that covers the whole spectrum of our society and economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. You've been exact in timing your answer. Thank you for that. And I think it's very important the message you've sent to us is that through the crisis, through a threat, there are opportunities, and the digitalization of the public sector, of course, is one. And you know, the shock has actually created a therapy, let's say, for a long-standing problem in the economy. And of course, there is one key word which I think everybody expects the government to push for, and that is governance, because you need governance for anything that happens as something new, as a reform. And now we're ready to move to Constantinos. Constantinos, please share with us your thoughts on this topic.
Hi everybody, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon everybody. I'm also very delighted to share today my views on the consequences, challenges and opportunities created by COVID-19 on the economy of Cyprus. As we all know, since March 2020, Cyprus joined the affected countries with the coronavirus disease. The government of Cyprus was fast. It took fast measures and managed to contain the damage and spread, making Cyprus one of the few countries that saw an easing on the lockdown within a few months. We are all living in a once-in-a-century pandemic with massive implications to the global economy. Global economy is in a freezing mode, and Cyprus economy is as well. Cyprus is not exception to the shrinkage of the economy this year. We are expecting, as Irene, but also the governor mentioned, a sharp decrease in the GDP. The IMF is projecting a recession of minus 6.5%, some others even higher, but also to be followed by a strong recovery, as Irene mentioned. The current account deficit is going to be in the order of 8% for 2020. Unemployment is expected to rise, a large fiscal deficit, and a substantial increase of government debt. However, as the other speakers mentioned, every crisis brings opportunities. And Irene mentioned that it's a good opportunity to rethink about our economic model and to proceed with structural reforms. It's time to diversify and promote promising sectors, education, research and innovation, entrepreneurship. It's time to put more resources into technology to become more digitally driven. In terms of the sectors of the economy that will be the value driver for the future in the post-COVID era, I will focus on three sectors. First, education. Second, healthcare combined with medical tourism. And third, services, and in particular, services related to investment funds. I will start with education. Over the last few years, we have seen a substantial increase in the number of university students in Cyprus from local universities. I expect that this trend will increase in the future. The crisis showed that the opportunity of distance learning, and therefore educational institutions will need to consider modernizing and need to integrate classroom and distance learning. And why not university opening a branch in Cyprus, similar to what they do in Asia. Healthcare and medical tourism is another sector. Cyprus enjoys 300 plus days of sunshine, and it also combines with high educated graduates from British University, including a lot of doctors. Why not take the advantage of this unique combination and provide incentives for medical institutions that will establish medical and rehabilitation centers, thus promoting medical tourism? Lastly, I would like to mention investment funds. Cyprus over the last decades has been a financial services sector industry, but this fiduciary services industry is being in diminishing mode. However, over the last 5-6 years, we have seen a focus on investment funds. Investment funds have grown from 1 billion in 2014 to over 8 billion in 2019. And we expect this sector to grow substantially. But however, we have still a lot of way to go if we compare ourselves with other jurisdictions such as Luxembourg with trillions of assets. That's all for the first question.
Thank you, Constantinos. I keep a very important point. We have a long way to go, and I will take that in a very positive spirit, because that means we have a lot of potential. So in times of crisis, it's good when you have potential, because it means there is opportunities waiting to be explored. And that leads us to the second topic that we are going to touch upon today, the equity fund established recently by the Cyprus government, seeking alternative means of finance. So I would ask both of you for your take on this and investment funds, which is something that you know very, very well in terms of expertise. And I think it's very important that you share this knowledge with the audience. So Irene, we'll start off with you. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. I mean, this was a decision taken by the government back in the summer of 2019 to set up an equity fund, a public equity fund with co-investors from the private sector. Just to clarify that we're still at the tendering process, so it hasn't really been set up yet, but the aim is to have it up and running by the end of the year. And the reason behind this decision was that, I mean, the Cypriot equity market is among the least developed in Europe. And although we see that the banks indeed have a high liquidity nowadays, there is still a need for alternative financing, particularly among those businesses, those startups, those innovative companies that they're in the development and early stages. And this weakness in our capital market, in our money market, is being recognized in a number of international indicators and also by the EU. And that's why the government said it was time to do something about it. So we believe that in this equity fund, there are benefits both for the government, for the banks, for the businesses, and for the investors. And the idea behind this instrument is to support the ecosystem. So we want to establish an instrument that's going to be operating in a full market-based approach and to canalize investment towards the market in partnership with additional co-investors. And this will contribute also maybe to a better venture capital industry, a healthier venture capital industry here in Cyprus, and a more sophisticated equity market. So as I said, we're now in the process of selecting through a public tender the fund manager. The call is actually now until the beginning of July. And the task is to set up and manage a registered alternate investment fund. So Constantinos can explain more to you if you want the technicalities around it. So the fund manager will be in charge of managing the fund. It can be set up as an umbrella fund with a number of compartments, with an initial capital of a bit over 20 million from the government. But in each project that the fund manager will be investing, there will have to be a co-investor either at the level of the compartment or the fund, or at the level of the investment. So it's clear that it's not only a public investment to enterprises. What we want to do is to come together with the private sector and find investments that they're really good for the economy of Cyprus, linking a bit to what I was talking about in the first question. So our focus would like our focus to be on seed and startup companies, technology companies, innovative companies, but also growth capital. There isn't a sectoral limitation. I mean, the equity fund is not targeting specific sectors, which is the case in many other countries, but we thought we're just starting. It's a kind of like a pilot equity fund. It's our first one. So we don't want it to be very sector specific. The idea is that the government will agree on the investment strategy with the fund manager, and then it will be up to the fund manager to deal with the investments, and the government will only have like a monitoring role on the board. So we don't want at all to be involved in the decisions on which investments are going to be the eligible ones for investment in. We just want to make sure that the strategy that we have is going to be applied. And then it will be up to the fund manager which is going to be regulated by CIFA. I wanted to be very clear by that. The fund will be registered in CIFA, and the fund manager has to be regulated by CIFA. So we have the regulatory authority looking after, the works of the fund. We only want to be interested in the investment strategy and the projects where the fund is going to be inventing it. And we hope that this will be a start for more financial instruments in the future for the government, because if you see also the trend at the European level is to move away from grants for the government and to move more towards financial instruments for assisting businesses. That's all from me on the equity fund.
That's quite a lot of information, actually. So good luck with the fund that is about to be set up and running soon. And of course, I am very much tempted to say I hope the fund manager is a she. And if there are any UCL alumni out there who are interested, guys, do apply. I'm advertising this to our very own crowd as an opportunity. Constantinos, you are very heavily involved in investment finance. So what's your take on the government trying to tackle this matter? And what other possibilities do you suggest?
Worldwide, alternative financing is gaining a share in financing SMEs. This is because traditional financing, such as banking loans, have been decreasing due to the fact that banks have become more risk averse. Also, in many countries in Europe, over the last few years, the market share of alternative financing has increased substantially, and in some countries it's more than 40%. In US, it's even higher. In Cyprus, the government of Cyprus up to now was supporting private sector access to finance through the development of financial instruments, mostly risk-sharing loan instruments. During the economic crisis, financial schemes designed by the European Investment Bank with the use of European structural and investment funds has been a key factor for the financing of SMEs. Now, the new initiative, as Irene mentioned, is the creation of an equity fund, a private equity fund, that will finance Cyprus SMEs. The public fund is called, I think, the public fund, and will be sponsored by the government for the seed capital. The seed capital will be in the order of 20 million, but then additional investors will raise capital from other investors. As Irene mentioned, there is not going to be a sectoral fund, so you can invest in many sectors of the Cyprus economy. It's an excellent initiative because up to now the private equity sector in Cyprus has been unexploited, and we have seen that in other countries, neighboring countries such as Israel, these funds are very successful. So I hope this fund will be successful, and I'm looking forward to see the results of this fund in the future.
Thank you, Constantinos. And now we're moving on to the third topic, which was something that coincidentally enough, both the Deputy High Commissioner and the Governor mentioned in their introductory comments. And that, of course, is sustainability and how you create a sustainable development through pursuing a greener economy, what the EU has now been calling, efforts to proceed on to becoming a green economy. So is that possible in the case of Cyprus, and what does it really mean in practical terms? So Irene, you've also specialized in your studies at UCL in this very particular sector, so it must be something which is close to your heart, I gather. So what do you think about this? What is your take on this?
Anna, you stole my opening remarks, which was exactly that. That was my degree, was on environmental and natural resources economics, and it was a great degree. I'm not sure if they still have it at UCL, but I would recommend it to everybody. It was a great year. It was my master's degree, and it is very close to my heart. I think it's a very important issue, and I think exactly that this pandemic has has made us understand what it means, because back then, I mean, we're studying about sustainable development. We've been listening about sustainable development. And I think what one of the previous speakers said, and it's very important, the distinction of climate change and this specific pandemic is that on climate change, everybody talks about it, but nobody really can grasp what the effects can be of climate change. And because it's something that we see that's going to happen in the future, we don't pay as much attention as we should. Well, this time we really realize how your life can change in one day from an environmental factor, because this pandemic, again, it's an environmental factor. It's nothing else than that. And reading these last 3 months about COVID and everything, I came up with this very interesting read about planetary health. So what we had been calling sustainable development before, I think now is changing to this planetary health, because in sustainable development, we talk about what we have to do for the future generations, while planetary health, it says we need a healthy planet in order to have a human civilization. And the health of human civilizations and the state of the natural systems, they both co-depend on each other, and it's very important. So, I mean, you mentioned the green economy. I mean, the European Union is putting a huge emphasis now with the Green Deal that was published even before the pandemic in December 2019, but also with the funding programs that they were announced only last week by the European Commission. And I'm talking about the next multi-annual financial framework, where basically they talk about two things: digitalization and green economy. And I know it will be difficult for Cyprus to face those two objectives, but I think it's a one-way street now. So I'm very happy about it, because I think this is the right direction. Already in Cyprus, in the last few years, there are things being done on sustainable development and climate change, but I think we're going to see a much bigger push now, both because the funding from the European Union is going to be quite high, but also because everybody will understand the necessity. I mean, here in the Ministry of Finance, we've been talking even from last year about a green tax reform, how we can reform the tax system and make it greener, making it at the same time fiscal neutral, so without imposing overall more taxes, but seeing how we can better tax economic activity, so that to help more the environment, maybe take out some other taxes from some other areas. So this is one of the priorities of the ministry for this year. I know that the Ministry of Commerce is thinking about a circular economy program, which also is something that's going to help a lot on dealing with the green economy. And we're looking also at what other countries are doing. I mean, the ministry participates in the Coalition of Climate Change for Ministers of Finance. It's an international coalition with over 50, 60 countries around the world. So, and it's a very good networking space where we can see what other countries are doing from around the globe, and maybe take, good examples, good schemes from other countries, in order also to promote this planetary health that I mentioned at the beginning. It's not an easy task, but I think that if we act collectively, and I'm talking about, again, the whole political system acting collectively on this, the government, the political parties, and the citizens of this country, I think we can make a very big leap forward. Thank you, Anna.
Excellent news. I keep what you've said. You said it's a one-way street. And of course, if the funding is there, if you guys over at the Ministry of Finance have already thought about fiscal policies which can align with this kind of framework, and of course, since there are good practices available out there by countries who've already gone down that road, already went down that road, that is quite encouraging. Constantinos, you're a man of numbers. You're an economist and a UCL economist and statistician. So does the environment and climate change and sustainability mean anything to you in terms of numbers or more than just numbers?
I will share my experience at the Cyprus Natural Gas Public Company. And I will share our efforts through a small presentation to bring natural gas in Cyprus, to build the infrastructure and import natural gas in Cyprus, thus limiting the use of liquid fuels, which are polluting, and thus leading to a greener environment. I will share my screen with a small presentation with these efforts.
We can't see anything, I'm afraid.
Okay, let me.
Okay, as we're running out of time, Constantinos, would you like to run through with the presentation and just talk us through it? Because time is very limited.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I know you put time and effort in preparing it, but technology is not helping us today.
Okay, no problem. Basically, Cyprus has been an energy isolated market, so there is no interconnected capacity. We have a high dependency on liquid fuels for power generations. We have 3 main conventional power stations owned by the Electricity Authority of Cyprus. The total is for 15,000 megawatts. At Basilico Power Station, there is a dual fluid fuel generation capacity of 830 megawatts. And also we have an increasing renewable penetration both in solar and wind. Over the last years, we have tried to issue tenders in 2010, 2012, and 2014 for the infrastructure and import of natural gas in Cyprus. These efforts failed for various reasons, but the effort that we started in 2018 was for the infrastructure, the Cyprus LNG import terminal project. This included the acquisition of an SFSRU, the construction of a jetty, and the construction of the onshore gas pipeline. Here, I should mention that the part of this, we got a grant from the European Union. So out of the capex of 290 million, 40% is financed through the grant of the European Union, and the rest is going to be financed by loan financing by EIB and EBRD. The consortium that won the proposal was the China Petroleum Pipeline Engineering with Metron SA and Williamson Ship Management. We have signed the agreement, and within 24 months, they have to establish the LNG import terminal, and then we will proceed with another tender for the import of natural gas. So by the end of 2020, by 2022, we will have natural gas here in Cyprus, leading to a greener economy.
Excellent news, and congratulations to DEFA, because I know a lot of effort was put by DEFA into managing to secure the European Union funds. It wasn't an easy task, and of course, as consumers, what we say, we just hope not only that the environment will be better off with this, but of course that energy costs will be much cheaper for us as consumers. So I think this is what everybody will have at the back of,
Yes.
of their head now. We do have some questions, I believe, from the audience, from the people watching this session. Okay, let me read it out. Speakers mentioned that a rebound of 6% of GDP in 2021 is expected, and these are the Ministry of Finance predictions indicating a V-shaped recession. What makes you so sure that the recession will not be U-shaped or even more prolonged in 2021 and 2022? Do you expect any negative aspects of the recession to stay and make it difficult for Cyprus to recover? And because this is using Ministry of Finance numbers and disputing maybe the numbers, Irene, would you like to start by sharing your thoughts on this?
Yes. Yes, of course. I mean, I can only share thoughts because indeed, I think the governor said it as well. We don't really know what the consequences will be on the economy. I mean, we know that this was a systemic shock, that it affected both demand and supply. We see it disrupted supply a lot. We see that demand now it's not picking up yet. I mean, it would be a joke to say that demand is picking up again, but I think we'll need to see what happens in the summer. It's very important to see what happens with the tourist sector. I mean, the airports are opening next week. We expect tourists, I imagine, by the end of June, beginning of July. So we'll have to see what the effects on the tourist sector are going to be before we are able to make any good assessment on the situation for 2021. And I mean, we are economists. I mean, we know that whatever we say in all our economic models, they're based on assumptions. So I don't think it's really that important if you're talking about a U-shaped or a V-shaped recession. I mean, only time will show that. What is important is to be ready to take all the necessary steps. And that's what we're trying to do, to limit the effects of this recession as much as possible.
Yeah, and the governor also said, it's important to act quickly. So, Constantinos, what do you think about the question posed? And let's not discuss too much if it's a V-shape or a U-shape. Do you have any thoughts on whether we have any negative aspects of the recession that will stay with us?
Whether it's going to be, how deep it will be the crisis will depend on the, as Irene mentioned, on the effects on the tourist sector. That as I mentioned, that the airports are going to be are open from the 9th of June, and we are expecting tourists. The projections are it's a substantial decrease in tourists compared to 2019. So we'll have to wait and see. The good thing is that we are taking measures. We are flexible. We are a small and flexible economy. So whether there are going to be any negative effects in the long run from this crisis, we have to wait to see. We have proved in the past that we are a small and flexible economy, and we can handle crisis.
Okay, so it's a rather positive, an optimistic scenario that we're all praying for. That being a small economy will be a comparative advantage to us in dealing with the crisis quickly. And of course, as Irene has said, the assumption is the economy is the greatest tool. So we're all assuming that things will work out for the best. And now we're moving on to the second question. Okay, this is something very interesting. When are we finally getting legislation for crowdfunding and crowd investment schemes in Cyprus? This is something which is pending for some time now. So, any words of wisdom, Irene? Do we actually know when this is happening or if it's happening?
Yes. I wanted to first add something on the previous question. If there is one risk that we should be very careful about is public debt. I think what private debt, debt in households and in businesses, because I mean our estimates say that the public debt is still sustainable even with this rise that we're going to have in 2020. But what we have to be very vigilant is borrowing both by households and by businesses. And we want to avoid, high levels of NPLs that we had before and things like that. So going to crowdfunding, actually in January this year, CIFA issued guidelines about crowdfunding, and it's already possible to do crowdfund, to have a crowdfunding platform here in Cyprus. And I think you should probably have somebody from CIFA in a future event and discuss this issue of crowdfunding. And also the European Union is coming up with a regulation. So we have now some guidelines from CIFA. So crowdfunding can already take place here in Cyprus. And by next year, I think we're also going to have the regulation from the European Union. So now it's not so much the regulatory framework, but more of implementing it, of getting people to learn about it. I mean, I was reading yesterday in Facebook about this fairy tales museum that was going to close down. And people were writing on Facebook, my God, this is such a bad idea. I mean, I've been there with my daughter. It's a great place. And I mean, if they were aware of crowdfunding, it would be so easy to collect, a few euros from people and then collect an amount to save. And it's just an example on where we can use crowdfunding already here in Cyprus.
Okay, crystal
That's from
clear.
me.
The framework is in place, and it's now a matter of being implemented and fine-tuning the details. But I would like to ask Constantinos something slightly different on crowdfunding, because Irene has given us the information asked in the question. Do you think crowdfunding is a good idea? I mean, is it really a good source of investment? Because a lot of investors actually don't like crowdfunding because it gets very messy. You have too many people not in there for the long run. As an investment specialist, Constantinos, what do you think about crowdfunding? What is your opinion on that?
We have seen crowdfunding in the UK working. It's successful. So I don't see why not being successful in Cyprus. If there is a legislation in place, then it can work. I know it's not. It's not. It's different from investment funds, but it can work. And we have seen the size of crowdfunding growing substantially over the last years.
Okay, so you're in favor, I gather.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the third question because we're running out of time. In a high inflation environment with devaluing currencies, shouldn't Cyprus establish its own currency? Otherwise, our country will be too expensive and thus sink into further economic contraction. Irene, do you agree with this statement? How would you like to respond to this?
First of all, I mean, we don't have high inflation environment. I mean, inflation has been very, very low for a number of years now. And I don't presume that we're going to have something like high inflation in the very near future, and especially with demand diminishing so much, with this COVID crisis. And I mean, I don't want to comment if we need to have our own currency or not. I mean, I believe a lot in the European dream, in European integration, although it's not always what we expect. I think we have benefited from being in the euro, so I wouldn't really consider that it's better for us to have our own currency, if that's answering the question.
I think it's answering both parts of the question regarding inflation and regarding the currency. Constantinos?
I believe that the risk of having your own currency are much more than the risk of the high inflation environment and being too expensive. Therefore, I'm also a strong supporter of the euro, and I believe it will be catastrophic for Cyprus to have its own currency.
Okay, that was a very firm yes for the euro and no to a national currency, I think, from Constantinos. And the discussion is very interesting. We only have time to address these three questions because, time is the most important currency of all, and we've run out of it, so we have to go. Before we close the discussion, of course, I'd like to thank Irene and Constantinos, who responded positively, very, very quickly to our invitation to be on this panel and offer us their views and their expertise on the post-COVID economy of Cyprus. And of course, thanks extended to Oxygono and Black Lemon TV. Andreas Philachtou is here handling all the logistics. We've been driving him crazy, I think, with all the questions and all the technicalities. But he's always smiling, taking it in his stride. So I'd like to thank him personally for all his positive spirit in bearing with the non-techies, of which I'm part. And of course, we all need to thank Nicolas Kyriakidis, who's been spearheading the initiative to rejuvenate the UCL Alumni Club in Cyprus, and who's behind this whole idea of organizing the online seminar series on behalf of the alumni. And I will again say what I've said before. We are in touch with the formal university authorities. They're very much in favor of getting the club restarted again. So if you'd like to join the Alumni Association, or you have people who are UCL graduates and would possibly be interested, please direct them towards our Facebook page for further information. And on this note, thank you for being with us. Thank you again, Irene and Constantinos, for being great sports in this effort. And good night to the audience.